Now that you have a research question and have conducted your literature review, the next step is to determine which methodology you should use to answer your research question. In communication studies, we historically work with three methods: qualitative, quantitative, and rhetorical. There is a not-so-hidden fourth method, which is mixed methodology, but for the sake of learning, let's just break down the three main COMM research methods. In this final research methodology video, we are exploring the big, scary one, quantitative research. This includes defining quantitative research, examining different types of quant research, and applying this method through a specific style, the simple one-shot survey. Let me start by reminding you that this is just an introduction to research. So while you are doing the statistical analysis portion, I'm going to make this somewhat easy for you so you can focus more on the doing and interpretation. By the end of this portion of the Triskelion, you should come out with an appreciation for why we ask you to take your statistics course before you get to your final COMM research class. For clarity and to ease some anxiety about this portion of the project, I will be doing most of the number crunching for you. Your focus is on interpreting the data you collect and the reports that I give you. I will also briefly mention the Belmont report and research ethics here. So let's start with what quantitative methodology actually is. We use the term empirical research when explaining qualitative and quantitative research. When you hear quantitative, you may think quantity, which also means numbers. Well, you're not wrong. In quantitative research, you are using number-based data to help you interpret connections. If we take that Epcot Ersatz project, then we could use this method to survey people on how they feel about the different experiences in each country across the World Showcase. We could even include a perception scale and ask specific questions related to the costumes, rides, theming, and entertainment. Fun fact, Disney World has an entire team devoted to this research, so if you're looking to how this actually applies to your future, here it is. You could legit get a job running research for Walt Disney World parks. And that includes qualitative researchers too. Okay, back on point. Quantitative methods are concerned with numbers and measurement to uncover patterns. I won't get into the numbers calculations here. That's for your stats and comm research class. But I will be helping you to learn how to interpret those numbers, which is key for academic research and a literature review. You're going to come across a lot of studies that give you numbers. So let me introduce you to academic research by introducing you to how to read some of those numbers. But first, let's run down the four types of quantitative research. We have experiments, surveys, content analysis, and meta-analysis. Since we are doing surveys for our quantitative reports, we will talk about this one last in more detail. First, experiments are exactly what they sound like. You are manipulating or experimenting with something to see how people will respond or react. However, we cannot just do anything we want. There are actually rules or ethics that we need to follow. This is true of any empirical research and why you need institutional review boards, IRBs, approval for those projects, though you would not need them for rhetorical criticism, just quantitative and qualitative. The Belmont report helps to ensure that a research project considers three things: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. This means that you are protecting the autonomy of the participants in your study, that you're not harming them and minimizing risks, and that you administer manipulations fairly. I'm going to use medical experiments here to help you understand this more. Take the Tuskegee syphilis study, which was a study conducted in the U.S. from 1932 to 1972. The purpose of the study was to see what would happen when syphilis was left untreated, so that by the end, researchers would know how to treat it and have a cure for treating syphilis. Okay, that sounds good, so what's the problem? Well, essentially, the U.S. Public Health Service and the CDC worked with a historically black college, the then Tuskegee Institute down in Alabama, to gain their participants. In 1932, historically black college, syphilis. Anyone seeing red flags yet? Well, let me break down in simple terms. The study had 600 black men, of which 399 had syphilis. These participants were only told they were being treated for something called bad blood, and were not informed of the study's purpose. They were not provided with their syphilis diagnosis, so they never knew that they had syphilis. And then they were never given treatments on syphilis at all. They were also told that this would only last for 6 months, but instead lasted until 1972, 40 years later. And that only stopped because the news ran a story on the study that prompted an investigation. Some retribution occurred after that, starting in 1973, but the damage was already done. This study and other studies like it is why we are careful in our experiments to consider the 3 tenets from the Belmont Report: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. And why RRBs are there on campuses and in groups to help researchers make sure you are compliant and ethical in your research methods. So that was experiments. We essentially ask numerical-based questions to ask after we expose people to something. In this sense, we are trying to find something called causality. However, we cannot say we have proven this is the cause. Just what we found suggests what we did as a possible explanation. Another quantitative method is meta-analysis. This is where you essentially compile all the numbers you can gather on a topic from the literature and then run more numbers. In this sense, researchers would compile those numbers across multiple studies to get a better picture of the whole instead of coming from them separately. Side note, if you come across a meta-analysis on your topic when doing a literature search, that is also a good place to see what literature is already done on your topic. Yet another method is called content analysis. This is what I like to call the number cousin of the rhetorical analysis and qualitative studies, because you are essentially counting the numbers of occurrences of something in a source of media. It's like television, social media posts, and then using those numbers to identify patterns. If I went back to the virtual ethnography project, I could run a content analysis to gather exact numbers on the patterns I discovered in my qualitative report. This is where mixed methodology is kind of hiding in plain sight. Why use one when you can use both and get a better picture? Finally, let's talk about the method you are using in your quantitative report for the Triskelion project. A survey is used to collect information from a group of participants, usually through scales that have been tested for their reliability. These scales can then be used to uncover relationships between variables. You will be doing this through something called a correlation. The numbers you will be reporting and interpreting are related to your survey scales and the correlations, so let's spend some time here learning how to report and interpret the numbers. First, you need to get the mean and standard deviation of a scale. This means putting all of the items in the scale together and calculating them for their average score. We won't get into kurtosis and all of that here. What we need to be able to interpret is what that number means. And it all depends on the scale's length. So if you had a scale ranging from 1 to 5, you should expect your mean to be around 3, which is average. If it is above or below that, then that is something that you want to investigate. For example, if my average score is 4.3 on that 1 to 5 scale, then something is causing this to be higher than average. If we were doing an experiment and we measured the same thing before and after, so pre and post testing, pre and post surveys, the change in scores between our manipulation, so we ask the survey, manipulate the experiment, ask the survey again, it could tell us something. For example, we look at a scale measuring Islamophobia. We ask participants the scale, then have them watch what we consider positive Muslim representation. And then we finally ask them the same scale again after they watched that thing we provided to them. If our average went down from 4.3 to 3.7, then we could infer that showing people positive representation in the media can change their prejudice or attitudes towards a group. And this is an actual study, by the way, if you're interested. Look up parasocial contact hypothesis research. So our averages on our scales can mean something. The next number we need to consider is something called Cronbach's alpha. Cronbach's alpha. This is the number that tells you how reliable your scale is. We are shooting for a 0.70 or above. Anything below that, and reliability gets a little bit questionable. If we do not have a reliable scale based on the calculations, then how can we say confidently that what we have uncovered in our study is reliable information? So look for the mean and standard deviation and the alpha number when people report their scales and their methodologies. You will be doing it too. It means something bigger than you may think. Finally, the last big numbers we need to interpret are called Pearson's R, which is connected to the correlation between variables. What you will be doing is essentially pitting variables together to see how they are connected. What is their relationship, essentially? These can be negative or positive. And the higher the number, the more relationship there is. This is the R number you will report in your results section. What you are finding is just a linear relationship, though, so you would not use terms like cause or prove in your results. You just found a statistically significant relationship between two things, so you can infer or imply that relationship exists, but you have not shown any causal relationship or proof that these things are together. It's just a suggestion, so you would legit use the term suggests in your writing. Keep in mind, though, media research historically has lower numbers. It is the significance, or the P number, that you need to look at next to determine whether a relationship exists. Essentially, the significance number, represented by a P, should be at a 0.05 or below. That means that you're 95% confident that this is a significant relationship. In the correlations you get, you will see the R number, which is the intensity of the relationship, and the P number, the significance of the relationship. These are the numbers you report when you discuss the relationships. So, if you saw a correlation of 0.45 with a significance of 0.001 between age and Islamophobia, you could write that you found a positive, significant relationship that suggests that the older a person is, the more they exhibit Islamophobia. The 0.45 is positive, and it's a pretty moderate number too. And the 0.001 tells us that this relationship is significant, that we are 99.9% positive that this is a thing. That means something. And better yet, if our Islamophobia scale showed a 0.89 reliability, we could feel pretty confident that what we found means something too, that it contributes knowledge to the world. And that's what research is about. So those are the numbers in a nutshell. You will be reporting these numbers and interpreting them, but I will run the numbers for you. Just to reiterate for clarity, you are doing a simple one-shot survey of which I will provide you the calculations and you will report the scale reliability, mean, standard deviation, and then report and interpret the correlation amongst your variables. We made it to the end of the lecture there here on quantitative research and even the end of our research lecture series in the class. So now you should be able to define quantitative research, explain the types of methods used, and apply that knowledge in your own quantitative report. If you still struggle, go over this video again, look at the multiple resources I provide on Canvas. They're there for a reason, going to be really good for helping you with those numbers and reporting those numbers. And definitely be sure that you are doing the smaller things like the chapters and the lecture video exercises here, as they are directly linked to our course objectives of introducing you to research and critical thinking. For the last time this semester, Dr. Waggoner signing off. Now go forth and enjoy your day.